Farmweek is a production of the Mississippi State University Extension Service.
Today on Farm Week, if it eats grain or grain is one of its ingredients, it's going to cost more than usual in 2013.
See how the Scarecrow gene could make agriculture more efficient on a grand scale.
In southern gardening, the Pyracantha, it's hardy, birds love to eat it, and it's beautiful in the winter.
In the markets, a Cotton Council survey suggests huge cuts in Mid-South cotton plantings this year as new crop corn contracts edge higher. Brian Williams will have analysis.
In the feature segment, gluten-free foods. Find out who they benefit and why most of them are bought by people who don't necessarily need them.
Because you have to make 2 separate meals and you have to...
They've actually allowed me to live a better, more enjoyable life. It's really easy now to come in and pick up anything I need and make just a normal traditional dish.
You know, they know that the product's safe and it is for sure gluten-free. They're not having to take the time to dissect the label because we're kind of doing that for them.
Good day, everyone. I'm Leighton Spann.
And I'm Artis Ford. Welcome to Farm Week.
If it eats grain, look for it to cost more in the grocery store this year.
Leighton, higher than normal food inflation is predicted for some food products in 2013. While snow cover has increased some in the nation, it's still not enough in many areas to alleviate the dry conditions from this past summer. Mark to Market's Mike Pearson reports.
As snow falls across America, the reduction of drought is slight. Snow cover map from IntelliCast shows increasing snowpack in the northern states, but it's nowhere near the amount needed, as evidenced by the University of Nebraska's Drought Monitor. Just under 68% of the land in the continental U.S. is rated abnormally dry to the exceptional drought category, down almost 2 points. The arid conditions prompted a USDA economist to say higher than normal food price inflation is in store for this year.
It had substantial and devastating impacts on the major field crops of the American Midwest. The most important field crop there is field corn. Now, people don't eat field corn directly, but it's processed into animal feed. That's a major input to the U.S. food supply chain. So we're seeing input costs rise for all of the meat products and then all of these animal-based products that consumers buy regularly. We're looking at inflation on the order of about 3 to 4% for beef and veal, pork, poultry, eggs, and even a little bit higher for dairy. For dairy, we're looking at probably 3.5 to 4.5%.
Volpe says the second half of the year will likely be when the full effects of drought will be realized on the price of processed food.
These all rely on commodities. They rely on field corn and soybeans and so on, and those input costs are going up. It's just that due to the more stages that are involved in bringing to the supermarkets and the contracts that govern these commodity prices for those foods, consumers won't see that till later in the year, and even probably to some small extent in the early part of 2014.
The rise in commodities may not impact all items in your grocery store aisles, as normal food price inflation of 2.8% is likely to be in place for most items.
So for most food categories that are not impacted directly by these higher commodity prices, especially field corn, we're looking at pretty normal food price inflation.
A recently discovered gene could lead to new varieties of crops that have significantly higher yields. The director of the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture said Monday in Starkville that the new Scarecrow gene can make a plant's photosynthesis more efficient. More efficient photosynthesis means more crop production, hence more food for a world that, he says, could have 9.5 billion people by the year 2050. Sunny Ramaswamy compared the current production of a corn plant and a rice plant in explaining what a difference the new gene could make if it was engineered into a new rice variety. Rice plants use what's commonly known as the C3 method of photosynthesis and are naturally less efficient at the process. Corn uses the C4 method of photosynthesis and is more efficient and better suited to drought and heat.
So corn plants are almost two times as efficient, I should say, at photosynthesis as our rice plants. Can you imagine if we got that knowledge from that corn plant of how that corn plant does it, transferred it to rice plants, and we're able to double photosynthesis in rice plants, and we can reduce the amount of acreage that is used for growing rice plants and the amount of water that we use. It's an unbelievable proposition to imagine, and we got to have those transformative paths forward that I was referring to in the talk this morning.
If the C4 photosynthesis of a corn plant is transferred to C3 plants through genetic engineering, Ramaswamy says farmers could grow rice and wheat in hotter, drier environments with less fertilizer while significantly increasing yields. Ramaswamy is a former faculty member at Mississippi State. Well, cold temperatures didn't stop visitors from traveling to the Mississippi Delta and the Delta Ag Expo last month in Cleveland, Mississippi. Among other things, growers learned new strategies to help herbicide applicators get better control over resistant weeds. Additionally, visitors learned about a disease to watch for in Mississippi soybean fields. Farmweek's Amy Taylor reports.
Any regular visitor at the annual Delta Ag Expo might say this year won't soon be forgotten. It was so cold, there were icicles hanging from display equipment. However, visitors attended to learn about new developments in herbicide sprayers, as discussed by Bob Wolf, consultant and retired application technology specialist with Kansas State University.
The problem we have when we use drift control nozzles is we may not get the coverage of the chemicals that we're using properly on the plant, targeted pest, and we may have poor control. So we're doing the research to try to sort out the differences between the application techniques, volumes and pressures and tank mix combinations. One of the things that we're focusing on today is the combination of the nozzle type and the chemical mix in the tank. What we've learned in the last few years is that the sprayer setup will be directly influenced by the different adjuvants and some of the chemical materials that are in that spray tank.
Additionally, Wolf says this research will help nozzle and applicator manufacturers provide better products. Another topic included closer disease monitoring discussed by Mississippi State University Extension Service plant pathologist Tom Allen.
One of the things that we happened upon during 2012, there was a tremendous amount of frogeye leaf spot that occurred throughout the state of Mississippi in the soybean crop. If the disease does occur, there are some different triazole chemistries that we can rely on if the disease occurs in specific settings. And there are also some pretty good resistant soybean varieties that can be looked upon for farmers in areas where they may feel that they've observed that resistance developing.
Dr. Allen says to visit Mississippi-crops.com for updates or contact your county MSU Extension Service office. The Delta Ag Expo is held every year at the Bolivar County Expo Center. From Cleveland, Mississippi, I'm Amy Taylor reporting.
Well, when it's cold outside and there's no flowers, how can you add color to the winter landscape? In this week's Southern Gardening segment, Extension horticulturist Dr. Gary Bachman shows us how the Pyracantha adds landscape interest with plentiful orange and red berries. It's also a winter food source for birds.
In the cold and dreary winter months, gardeners need to rely on plant features besides flowers for color interest. Pyracantha is a good choice with its colorful berries that add beauty to any winter landscape. The botanical name for Pyracantha literally means firethorn, for which it is commonly known. This plant certainly lives up to this name, with the sharp and painful thorns on almost all the branches. Pyracantha is a medium-large landscape shrub and is evergreen in mild winters. This shrub is versatile with many landscape uses. Left unpruned, Pyracantha has a casual growth habit and can be up to 10 foot by 10 foot. The arching branching habit is accentuated by the production of red-orange berries towards the ends. The heavy fruit clusters seem to drip off the branches. The fruit clusters are prominent from late fall all the way through to the spring season. Perhaps the most popular landscape use is as an espalier specimen. Pyracantha readily accepts being trained. This can really enhance a blank wall or fence. Pyracantha is a fast-growing shrub that is suitable all across Mississippi. The best fruit production is from plants in the full sun. When grown in the shade, fruit production and growth rate will be reduced. Pyracantha adds beauty to our Mississippi landscapes, and the berries play an important role as a winter food source for wildlife. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman for Southern Gardening.
Layton, Texas A&M University reports that Pyracantha berries are not poisonous as commonly thought. The berries are very bitter, but they are edible when cooked and are sometimes made into jelly, which is something I learned.
Wow, I didn't know that either.
In the feature segment today, gluten-free foods. Find out who needs them and why they're so popular. Time now for the markets with Layton. And Layton, the results of the Cotton Council's intention survey is out, and it's surprising.
It is surprising. Only half as much cotton may be planted here in the Mid-South as compared to only last year. All right, some other stories that we will be following in the markets today. The USDA reports strong soybean production out of Brazil. Meanwhile, the government forecast for chicken production is bumped up, and a beef sector analyst calls for a bullish spring for cattle. We begin with cotton, where pressure from outside markets put the brakes on, so to speak, the upward momentum in the days leading up to our production deadline this week. Now, the big news again since our last recording is the release of the Cotton Council's annual planting intentions survey, and U.S. producers say they intend to plant just over 9 million acres of cotton in 2013. Now, here in the Mid-South, Mississippi and other states, huge cuts in planted cotton acreage may be in the offing. The survey results show growers intend to plant 1 million acres across the Mid-South, which is half of last year's total. Analyst Jamie Kohaki thinks the fundamentals of the cotton market, though, are fairly bullish, even with huge world stocks, half of which are owned by China.
Broad-based selling caught it. We went on a nice rally too and saw some tech selling. I think you still buy the breaks in the old crop. July down around 80.60. I like that. The stop closed below 80, and I think we will remain supported down there as long as the dollar doesn't get too hog wild, up above 81 or 82. But it's the acreage game there, less acres, and look for it to remain supported.
On the same day the results of the Cotton Council survey were released, the USDA released its monthly supply and demand reports. Extension Ag economist Brian Williams talked to me Thursday about what the report indicated for corn and soybeans. Brian, what did that February 8th report have to say about corn ending stocks?
Well, for the U.S., corn ending stocks were about 30 million bushels higher. Most of that was because of lower export numbers. And then the global supplies were up about 2.1 million tons, and the vast majority of that came from higher yields, expected yields in Brazil.
Johnny, would you say economists had expected this increase in ending stocks for corn?
I think globally, yes, mainly because of the positive reports coming out of South America. They were expecting some increase in.
Are we still in a situation where the stocks to use ratio is fairly tight for corn?
It is. It's very tight. There's only been 2 years that have been comparable to this year in terms of the low numbers. In 95 and again in 73 were the only 2 years that were close to what we're seeing now.
Now, as far as the 2013 crop, if we had some kind of shortfall come harvest time, either due to weather, a drought situation, or something else, what would that do to the corn market?
I think it could be very interesting, to say the least. With the stocks being so tight already, if we see reduced production going into this next year, it could cause some chaos potentially in the markets, and it's something we need to keep a close eye on. At this time last year, they were expecting some record production in the corn markets, and that definitely didn't happen. So we need to keep an eye on the weather going into spring and the rainfall in the corn producing areas.
All right, let's shift to soybeans here for a little time. What did the report say about soybean ending stocks?
Soybeans, the U.S. stocks were down about 10 million bushels. Most of that was an increase in the soybean crush. And then globally, we saw a decrease of about 600,000 tons in the stocks. or an increase of 600,000 tons in the stocks, and that's because of, again, Brazil. They're expecting record production for soybeans coming out of Brazil.
There's been a lot of media attention on that lately, especially.
Yeah, definitely.
So soybean stocks appear to be adequate when we talk about the world supply?
Globally, yes, they are. They're about 23% stocks to use ratio, so globally we're sitting pretty good on soybeans.
Our trivia quiz this week deals with a subject of importance to all livestock operators, veterinarians, the people who provide medical treatment to animals. And here's the question: how many states have a veterinary school? Is the answer 28 or 35 or 41 or all 50? You'll find out the answer here in a few more minutes.
We're going to pause for a short break on Farm Week. Coming up, we'll look at the calendar and the second part of the markets. Leighton Spann reports chicken prices are growing while cattle prices are under pressure. In the feature segment today, gluten-free food products. Most of the people eating them are doing so for non-medical reasons.
Our tradition of learn by doing is creating new opportunities. My 4-H is involved with service projects in communities all across our state.
We develop leaders for Mississippi's future.
My 4-H is science and technology, everything from computers and robotics to exploring our environment.
My 4-H promotes active lifestyles and encourages physical fitness, healthy foods, and nutrition.
My 4-H is Mississippi 4-H.
Before we get back to the markets, let's look at the Farm Week calendar. Mississippi Women in Agriculture will hold their annual conference on Thursday, February 28th. The location is MSU Central Mississippi Research and Extension Center on Seven Springs Road at Raymond. Budgeting, management, and networking are among the items on the agenda. The 23rd Mississippi State University Greenhouse Tomato Short Course is Tuesday and Wednesday, March 5th and 6th. The location is the Eagle Ridge Conference Center on Raymond Lake Road at Raymond. Register early and the fee is $150. Register after February 22nd and it's $175. You can register online prior to February 22nd. This is the nation's top greenhouse tomato short course. Not unusual for participants come from 25 states. Pest management, direct sales, getting the best fruit quality, and many other subjects will be covered. We'll also have online registration links on our Farm Week website calendar. And go to our Farm Week website at farmweek.msucares.com for information on these and other events. Now check out this week's Farm Week Snapshot.
This month, the government raised its 2013 forecast of U.S. chicken production. Analysts say broiler hatchery data points to continued expansion of bird numbers. As well, the weights of birds at slaughter have also been increasing, according to this new report. Meanwhile, the export forecast for chicken has also been increased from last month based on stronger demand from a number of different markets. At midweek, some livestock analysts felt that additional pressure is developing in the cattle sector. While some traders are of the opinion this could weaken beef's potential, analyst Darren Newsom remains optimistic for the spring and summer.
There's a lot of things going on in beef right now in the cattle market, and most of them do look bullish. I mean, before we had that cattle on feed report, we had a very sharp sell-off in the cattle market. I mean, they just plummeted. But that was probably necessary because we had been sitting up at pretty high price levels. Put the market into an oversold situation. We kind of got out of trading the Feb-April spread, and we started focusing more on the April-June spread, which is quite bullish. It is indicating that we've got a much more bullish fundamental situation this spring and summer. So the market's looking at that now. They're taking in all of these month after month of lower placements and just smaller, there's less cattle on feed at this point. So they're targeting that spring-summer time frame. So it looks like we've turned the corner. The cattle market should start going up. It certainly looks like the cash market should stay strong. We're starting to move into more of a seasonal time frame when we start to see beef start to move again. So there's a lot of things, a lot of bullish factors lining up for the cattle market as we look ahead into the spring and summer.
Before the feature story is our trivia answer for you. And this week, the correct answer is A, Mississippi, and 27 other states have colleges of veterinary medicine.
Well, if you're like me, you've heard of gluten-free, but you probably wondered, what is gluten and why do I need to be free of it? Well, gluten is a naturally occurring protein found in wheat, rye, and barley. For 1% of the U.S. population, gluten is a problem. They have what's known as celiac disease, an autoimmune condition. Now, it's not a food allergy, but if you have celiac disease, you want to avoid gluten. And that's harder than you think. But the task is getting easier. Surprisingly, a vast majority of gluten-free products are bought by those not affected with celiac disease. Mark to Market's Paul Yeager explains.
Navigating the aisles of a grocery store is an easy task for most shoppers. Meat, dairy, produce, no problem. But for an increasing number of consumers, finding foods that fit their gluten-free diet is difficult. Alex Lemke knows the struggle.
I found out I was celiac several years ago.
She's been gluten-free for several years after being diagnosed with celiac disease, a condition that damages the lining of the small intestine.
The first challenge is realizing that gluten is in so many products that you would have never, ever guessed. So that's frustrating. It just would surprise you where it turns up.
Gluten may seem easy to escape, but it's found in more products than just sliced bread and cereal. It turns up in unexpected items, from salad dressings to taco seasoning, and can even be found in the candy aisle. Emily Galazi knows this all too well. The 17-year-old was recently diagnosed with celiac disease and is the only one of her siblings restricted to a gluten-free diet.
It's really hard because you have to make 2 separate meals and you have to have 2 separate bags of chips, 2 just separate snacks. And it's hard to have breakfast in the morning because if you want toast, you have a different toaster.
Gluten, a protein found in processed foods made from wheat, barley, and rye, has always caused problems for those who suffer from celiac disease. But in recent years, many consumers who do not have celiac disease have also embraced gluten-free diets. A study by Packaged Facts, a leading consumer research firm, found that nearly half of those who buy gluten-free products do so because they perceive the products to be generally healthier. Other consumers use gluten-free foods as a method of weight management or because they think the products are of higher quality.
I have a lot of friends that choose to just follow a wheat-free lifestyle because they feel better, feel like they look better, it helps keep their weight down.
With greater demand for gluten-free products, the industry is booming, growing 28% over the past 4 years, and by the end of 2012, the U.S. market for gluten-free foods is expected to exceed $4 billion annually. Niche gluten-free brands are growing dramatically, and major food manufacturers are catching on, offering classic brands in new gluten-free options. Grocery chains like Midwest giant Hy-Vee are making the gluten-free shopper's trip to the grocery store a little easier. Hy-Vee has seen a 22% company-wide increase in gluten-free product sales in the past 2 years, according to Director of Health and Wellness, Julie McMillan.
So we've expanded these sections by a ton. Generally, we were anywhere from a few hundred items, gluten-free items, and now we're thousands of gluten-free items that we offer our customers.
She says that Hy-Vee listens to its customers to determine what their needs and wants are, even if that means redesigning the store.
We've also gone as far as separating it out for the consumers, so it makes their shopping experience a little easier. They're able to just go to one section in the store and make it a one-stop shop for them.
Each Hy-Vee store has different gluten-free offerings, depending on the demands at varying locations, but labeling is always important.
Over the past couple of years, Hy-Vee's really focused on making it easier for that gluten-free shopper. So we've added shelf talkers that really highlight the products themselves, and then we've pulled out the products from the mainstream line and put them into sections where we call out that specific section. So some things you wouldn't normally think about a gluten-free shopper missing would be like cakes and cookies and brownies. So we put them all into one section where the gluten-free shopper can easily find that chocolate cake that they've been missing out on.
After being told what they cannot eat, Lemke and Galazi say it's refreshing to see so many items they can eat.
They've actually allowed me to live a better, more enjoyable life. It's really easy now to come in and pick up anything I need. and make just a normal traditional dish.
You know, they know that the product's safe and it is for sure gluten-free. They're not having to take the time to dissect the label because we're kind of doing that for them.
Especially all the brownies and cakes and stuff, so you feel like if it's your birthday, you can just get that, or Christmas, you can just make a pie, or so it's easier. It makes you feel better that there's more options.
Package Facts estimates that only 10% of consumers purchasing gluten-free items do so because they or another family member have celiac disease. And that is prompting some critics to wonder if the growth in the gluten-free foods is just a fad. But Hy-Vee officials believe the trend is here to stay.
You know, when we see individuals that go on a gluten-free diet and have the results and the benefits, literally they're life-changing. So once they've had that positive impact, they're not gonna change their diet back.
For Market to Market, I'm Paul Yeager.
And you can catch us on the Farmweek website and Facebook page for that story again. We are at the end of Farm Week for this week. On our next show, this year's Dixie National Sale of Junior Champions.
2013 marked a milestone. More than $5 million has now been bid during the sale's 44-year history. This year's sale brought in almost $317,000 alone.
In Southern Gardening, sedums. These plants are so tough they can grow on the tops of buildings. For the rest of the Farm Week crew, I'm Artis Ford.
And I'm Leighton Spann. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week.